Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another Retro Adventures. Because at the end of another week, the end of another poll, we've got a winner by the slimmest of slim wins for an imbalance of power for the Star Trek role-playing game. Now, this is basically a tie, but I've noticed that imbalance of power was a single vote ahead, so it was that tight a race this week. Now, this is going to be a PDF review, so we're going over to the computer desktop to have a wee look at that in a second. And as usual, I'll be back at the end of the video with some other channel-related stuff and some other poll-related stuff. But before I do that, I'd like to take a moment and talk about my Patreons, who this week I have been told know that Captain Kirk has 3 ears, his left ear, his right ear, and his final frontier. Now, these are wonderful people who forgive my terrible jokes and help support the channel, especially in these times when it needs it the most. So I'd like to thank them from the absolute bottom of my heart. Their efforts are so much appreciated. Now, if you'd like to join them and help support the channel, or you'd like to see these videos a week early, or you'd like to gain access to one of the other levels of patronage we've got, then there's a Patreon in the description down below. If you check it out, it'd be very much appreciated. But anyway, let's have a look at an imbalance of power. So, this is an imbalance of power, which came out from the FASA Corporation for the Star Trek role-playing game in 1986. And the first thing that occurred to me on reading through this, the big surprise, was this is a Klingon adventure. In it you play Klingons, fighting for the Klingon Empire, and you're up against the Federation. Now, I thought all Star Trek adventures were from the Federation's point of view. All the ones I've played have certainly been. So this was a very pleasant surprise, and it brings an entirely different tone to the adventure, because there is power to be gained here. You're trying to gain honour, you're trying to get status, rather than, if you're for the Federation, you're just following the rules. You're being a reliable little Federation officer doing the right thing. But in this, you are a Klingon, you are trying to prove yourself, you're trying to get rewards and honour and status and influence and all that kind of cool stuff. And it makes it very different, and that excited me. I'm not 100% convinced the adventure works in every way, but I really like what they've done. So, first of all, looking at the back cover. Your advanced scout vessel has discovered an inhabited planet with large amounts of durallium, a rare and valuable mineral. The Empire will reward you and your Klingon cohorts if you can find an efficient way to exploit the natives and take the minerals for the Empire. The usual course of action is to put one faction of the native population into absolute power. Thus the Empire does not have to waste time with any internal problems. However, there's a small matter of a civil war to resolve first. Included with the adventure is a simple board game containing full-colour 22-inch by 17-inch map and 228 colour counters. And indeed, that's what this adventure's about. You're on board a Klingon ship which arrives in a system and discovers some durallium. And this is going to be a resource you can exploit. And without going any further, the adventure kind of follows the lines of an episode of the original series, where we saw the Klingons trying to exploit a native population. But this time it's going to be the players. And there's a whole lot more going on than just the basic plot of that episode. So there's a lot of interesting stuff to do. Now, I've been asked to warn people before I go into spoiler territory. So this is where I'm going to open up the book, and I'll be talking in more detail. So if you don't want the contents of the adventure spoiled, turn off now. So inside, we've got the usual FASA publishing standards, which are very nice. It's very clear, and there's a lot of nice artwork in here. Just little things at first, but throughout. So, the plot synopsis. The crew of the Dundaspu discovers a star system containing a planet that is not an AM-class, but contains some of the largest known deposits of durallium, an extremely rare element used in the manufacture of anti-radiation shielding for Starship warp drives. Despite Federation rumours to the contrary, Klingons rarely do but shielding on their warp drives. The crew's task is to exploit the natural resources of the planet to the best advantage of the Empire, and of course themselves. Because bringing resources back to the Empire to build its war machine is an important job, not just winning battles, but helping the Empire defeat its enemies later. So, the players, as senior staff of the Klingon ship, will want to take responsibility for exploiting this, so they get a large share of the profits out of it, which will of course buy them influence back home. So that's kind of how it goes. Now, as I said, it's based on the episode A Private Little War, where we see Klingons trying to side with one faction on a planet so they can exploit that planet. And that's what's going on here. The Klingons arrive and will want to do that. But anyway, we'll continue. So we've got the contents of the book, which mentions we have the board game. So we have the final battle, which details the end of the adventure. Anyway, we've got setting the stage. So the ship is exploring, it finds the star system, and it scans a habitable planet. They go into orbit, and if the ship's crew is efficient enough and manage to get a high enough Starship sensors roll, they'll detect the alloy deposits. Elsewise, they get sent down as an away team to see if they can find anything, and on their tricorders, when they're down on the surface, they will detect the alloy instead. So they can know what they're going into early, or it can be fed to them later on if their characters just aren't quite good enough. So it makes a comment about the Games Master understand that an incredible amount of money is at stake in this adventure because of the rich durallium deposits. And it explains how it will work because they will get shares in it. Now, this does motivate them to do things for themselves. As events carry on through the story, they could call in reinforcements and call in more Klingon ships, but all the senior staff of them will want shares as well, diluting their profits. So the Klingons are very motivated to do things for themselves here. And even more so, they won't want to hand things down to lower status officers because they want all the credit for doing everything themselves. Tells you how to maximize profits, and then we've got going planet side. So they beam down. But when they beam down, they have transporter trouble because the massive deposits of alloys cause problems with their transporters, and that's the first sign of what they're going to be scanning for if they missed it from orbit. But they check around and they encounter some inhabitants. They observe a village a few hundred meters away. As they move towards the village comes under attack from some raiders, and the Klingons can help the villagers. And it goes on as they befriend the villagers, and they meet the settlers of Silivar. There's different people, and the Klingons will obviously be expecting respect, but they're outnumbered, so they can discover some more about the planet. And there's the settlers, who tend to raise crops and all that, and there's the raiders, who are far more violent. So, carrying on through, we've got a surprise visit as people dislike the Klingons and raiders attack, so the people in the village blame the Klingons because they are strangers. So the Klingons will end up getting kicked out of the village. So they meet the tribe who are outside, the raiders. Now, depending how they speak to the raiders, they can actually get a lot of status from admitting that they helped defeat the raiding party earlier by proving themselves great warriors, because that's what the raiders respect. If the Klingons try and pretend that they weren't anything to do with it, they won't get any credit for it. But the raiders will not feel bad about it if you've proven yourself in combat by defeating some of their colleagues. And the amount of status you get throughout the adventure has an effect in the battle at the end. So we're keeping track of all these things. Carrying on further, get introduced to the camp of the people, they break taboo, there's an injured child, and there's a challenge goes on. So they have a trial by combat. There's optional encounters carrying on with that, games, learning more, etc., etc. Then they get introduced to the larger tribe. And we've got different people are there. The leader obviously leads, shaman, hunters, thinkers, builders, talkers. And the raiders will allow the Klingons to prove themselves, because the raiders, all their combat people are female, and the Klingons probably are a mainly male crew, especially if you're going with the pre-generated characters included in the adventure. So they've got to earn their respect because they're males and they're not fighters. So they go through a test. And it talks through, so we've got the shaman. The medical officer is best suited to the shaman. The hunter, the thinker, the builder, and they have to prove themselves in these roles. And at the end of it, once the Klingons have proved themselves to be equals or better of the Raiders will submit and become part of the Klingon tribe. So the Klingons now have the people allied with them that they'll want to take over the planet. But it's up to them to decide how they're going to equip this army. And that becomes very important later. So we've got the plan where the Raiders are wanting to be trained, they're wanting to be equipped, and they'll then take over the villages for the Klingons as part of the Klingon Empire. Got a victory celebration as things happen, and it talks about weapons and other toys. However, as the Klingons are recovering from the celebrations, they've obviously drunk too much, they've partied with their new allies, they've done the big warrior festival. The USS Essex, a Constitution-class vessel, manned entirely by Vulcans, arrives in orbit. So the players have to decide what they want to do. Because the Klingons don't own the planet yet, so the Federation has a right to explore it. Now, the big thing here is whether the Federation's going to have a problem. Because if the Raiders ally themselves with the Klingons and control the entire planet, then it's a Klingon planet. The population of the planet have decided who they want to side with. The Federation have no rights here. But until the Raiders take over, the Federation are going to try and buddy up to the settlers. Now, as Vulcans, they can be extremely fierce and extremely dangerous, and the Klingons do respect it. But one of the big things is they know that Vulcans won't lie, and they know Vulcans respect the Prime Directive. So, if the Klingons have been giving the Raiders disruptors and high-tech weapons, that's obviously interfering with the planet. So the Federation will feel a need to step in and cause problems, which causes problems for the Klingons because the Constitution-class vessel itself is more powerful than their vessel, so they can't win a direct fight. But if the people of the planet, the Klingons, are just training up and showing them how to make weapons which are better than their own, make gunpowder, create basic firearms and things like that, equip themselves with better weapons than they'd created themselves, but they are manufacturing them themselves, the Federation won't get involved. The Prime Directive holds. This is a pre-warp civilization, and the Federation will not interfere. So it becomes this balancing matter that the Klingons don't want the Federation to step in. So they don't want to equip their allies too well. But they might have already started before the Federation turned up. So we've got the message from the Vulcan captain, Salar, what implications are going on there, and what happens as the Federation start exploring the planet. And we've again got the Klingons, the Federation are off doing their things, the Klingons have their time to train up. Because the Federation won't interfere if the Raiders go in with their new weapons and their new training and conquer. That would be interference, so they won't get involved. But things will change, because we've got a raid going here, different ideas. One of the points it makes is that it's difficult to break traditions, so the Raiders have their own weapons which they're used to, and while you can prove that high-tech weapons, or if you're teaching them how to make weapons of their own, are better, if there's something goes wrong, and it's got rules in here for maintenance, if the weapons malfunction, then the Raiders will be like, nope, that's too dangerous, we'll keep with our weapons because they're more reliable. So there's training them to use weapons, there's keeping them updated, and there's leadership involved in making sure the Raiders kind of follow your plan. Anyway, continuing on. There's a matter of whether or when they raid one of the settlements, there are Vulcan crew from the ship already there. So you have to basically stun them. If you kill them, then the Federation ship will step in, because you're killing Federation crew. But if you only injure them, if you subdue them in some fashion, and then hand them back, the Federation won't step in. They won't have a big problem with that. And even if you do kill the crew, it does mention that if you then hand over the murderer to the Federation for punishment, that will stop further effects. But that's a good reason for having people along, because it could be one of your characters, or it could be the ship's captain itself. And that would be very, very bad if you have to hand them over to the Federation. Especially as they probably won't go along with it. As time goes on, we've got an image here of time becomes a limiting factor. While you've got lots and lots of time to train up your forces and prepare them, until a Federation fleet is detected. 2 destroyers and a frigate are coming. We've got stats on them later. But once those ships arrive, then the Klingons are going to be pretty much forced out, because there will be such a show of power and such defense of the villagers. Anyway, we've got some maps of the village. The larger village. Then we've got stats for the Painbringer, the Klingon ship that the people are aboard, the Dundaspu Great Book Strike, the USS Essex Constitution class, the 2 Larsen destroyers, and 1 Lochnar class frigate. And I really do love all these pictures. These bring back so many memories, because I adored the designs in the Federation book and all the stuff they did for the FASA role-playing game. This is original series Star Trek extra stuff to me. We've got cast of characters, so we've got the Klingon crew, as I said, they're mainly male. We've got some NPCs, including the settlers, the people, which is the Raider tribe. We go on to the Vulcans, so we've got Vulcan Captain and typical security guards. We've got some Games Master notes, including a timeline. We've got the Captain's Transportier. I think it means transporter, because the Captain can transport himself around. We've got Money and Klin. Well, Klin is this status that they're making for different tasks. So being honest with the people, winning fights, etc. builds your Klin, which builds your effect in the final battle. We've got some new weapons, including the throwing star, which we saw on the cover. Primitive firearms that they could help build. Some different alien creatures. We've got players' pullouts and the board game. And an invitation to join the Star Trek The Official Fan Club. The back cover. And then we've got a booklet which was tucked inside the final battle, which, as it says, is a board game. We've got the rules here. Movement, climbing walls, training, etc. Officers and small unit tactics, showing what's within their unit. Got terrain effects and all that. Weapons training status, combat resolution, lots and lots of rules for a fairly complex board game. Leaders, village walls, assaults, victory conditions. The players' information. Much of the information about the tribes. Talking about a private little war from the Federation point of view. Technology upgrades possible, so how the Klingons could help the Raiders get better weapons, including up to energy weapons, Imperial policy against giving any form of energy weapons to cultures with physical sciences index less than 6, with the exception of an occasional single weapon given as a gift or bribe. We've got a map. We've got the counters. So that is an imbalance of power. I can see how that works. It's really, really interesting to be playing from the Klingon point of view. It's really, really interesting, the idea that the Klingons can call on extra help, but won't want to, because it will dilute their share of the profits and the status they'll get. But I think more interesting is the way that they can play off the Federation, especially with a Vulcan crew, and the Prime Directive to stop the Federation getting involved. They've got a time thing going on because obviously a larger fleet will arrive and they won't just be dealing with Vulcans, they'll be dealing with other races as well. Humans especially will stick their nose in where they shouldn't. But while they're dealing with the Vulcans, they've got a chance to strike quickly and get the planet to fall within the Klingon sphere of influence and profit heavily out of it. So that was an imbalance of power, which won the poll this week with 30% of the vote. But as I said earlier, it was a very, very weird poll because everything was pretty much tied. Because second, also on 30%, was Last Rites for Call of Cthulhu. But when I zoomed into the graphs, I could see an imbalance of power was ahead, I'm guessing by a single vote. And rather strangely, the third and fourth position were both tied on 20% as well. But when I zoomed in on those, Hot Rods of the Gods looked to be slightly ahead, with A View to a Kill for the James Bond 007 RPG slightly behind. But as I said, both on 20%. So a very, very strange poll where we basically had first and second but tied both of those. But anyway, they're all wiped out the poll and we're going back to a retro RPG poll. And the first two options in this have been suggestions by viewers. Now, as always, I ask you, if you'd like to have me look at a game, mention it in the comments down below, and I will put it into a future poll, and we will see if more people want to see it. As I absolutely love yous introducing me to the RPGs which you love, ones I don't know much about, and I get to explore a brand new game and find out some fantastic stuff. As I said, the first two options are suggestions. First up, we've got Cult by Metropolis Limited, which came out in 1992. And then we've got RuneQuest 3rd Edition by Chaosium, Avalon Hill and Games Workshop from 1987. Now this is the Games Workshop UK release. Specifically I was asked to look at. They also asked for Stormbringer, which I'll put in a future poll because I would love to look through that. So these are both games I don't know much around. One of my friends had RuneQuest, but I never got a chance to play it. So I really don't know much about either of those games. So if they win, it'll be a fantastic learning experience and I'll get to experience a brand new game. But from my collection behind me, we've also got World Book 15 Spirit West for Rifts. Now, I definitely ask you to consider that. Rifts is always a good time. There are always fantastic ideas in it. Rifts is just so packed with information and fun things that it's always going to be good to look through. And finally, we've got Realms of Sorcery for the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which came out from Hogshead Publishing in 2001. Now, Hogshead did some great work with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and it's one of my favourite fantasy settings. So it'd be lovely to return to that and get a look through a source book, rather than all the adventures we've been covering, because we covered all the Enemy Within campaign. But Warhammer's absolutely brilliant, and we'll have fun doing that as well. Now, as usual, I'm publishing stuff over on DrivethruRPG. There'll be a link down below if you want to check it out, or if you want to gain access to everything I've published on there, plus a bunch of other stuff which I wasn't allowed to publish, then there's a large archive over on the Patreon. So if you subscribe to the Patreon, you'll get access to all of those if you subscribe at Laird or Librarian status. Also, since YouTube has started taking down some of my videos, especially the Satanic Panic ones, because people have been complaining about them, using the YouTube rules against me for discussion of certain subjects which YouTube doesn't like, although I don't break the rules. They've considered I have, and they've taken the videos down. So they're over on the Patreon as well. And if you subscribe to the Patreon at any level at all, you gain access to those. So if you're interested in seeing my videos, which are now restricted and deleted off YouTube, you'll find them over there. And finally, over on rpggamer.org, I've been working my way through Skeleton Crew, doing the reviews. We're only one episode from the end at this point, and then I'll be doing all the stats. And I've been going through episode by episode through the Young Jedi Adventures. And there's some fun stuff on there. I've been doing stats for that. But anyway, as usual, I've been wittering on for absolutely ages. So thank you very much for watching. As always, most of all, you look after yourselves. And I'll catch you later. Bye now.